A heart stops on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue, and a city holds its breath. Amid the glittering chaos of wealth, 8-year-old Lily Miller, a pale, freckled girl in tattered clothes, sells candy bars, her dreams of becoming a doctor mocked by all. But when ruthless tycoon Arthur Vance collapses, clutching his chest, Lily's small voice cuts through the crowd. "Calm down, I'm a doctor." Her impossible courage sparks a miracle and a dangerous conspiracy. Subscribe and share where and when you're listening. New York, Paris, midnight, or dawn. Can a child's heart save a man's soul? The truth will stun you. The October wind swept down Manhattan's Fifth Avenue, sharp and biting, slicing through the golden haze of a late afternoon. The street thrummed with the pulse of wealth. Taxis screeched, heels clicked, and briefcases swung in the hands of the city's elite. At the edge of 57th Street, 8-year-old Lily Miller stood like a ghost among giants, her tangled blonde hair whipping across her freckled face. Her faded jacket, too thin for the chill, hung loose over patched jeans. A cardboard box of candy bars sat at her feet, a scrawled sign reading $1 each fluttering in the breeze. Earlier that morning, her classmates' laughter had echoed through the rundown Queens schoolyard. Their taunts, "Doctor? You? Just a street kid dreaming too big," cutting deeper than the cold. Lily clutched her mother's worn, basic anatomy book, its pages her refuge, her pale blue eyes fierce with defiance. Each candy sale was a lifeline for her and her grandfather Sam in their cramped apartment, where rent loomed like a specter. Lily's fingers, chilled to the bone, traced the book's diagrams, valves, arteries, the heart's quiet rhythm. She mouthed words like ventricle and coronary, her lips barely moving, as if speaking a secret code. Passers-by hurried past, their eyes skimming over her as if she were part of the pavement's cracks. But Lily stood tall, her small frame a testament to dreams too big for her world. Across the avenue, Arthur Vance stepped from his black limousine, his sharp blue eyes scanning the glittering skyline. At 55, the real estate tycoon was a titan of Wall Street, his gray hair impeccably styled, his tailored coat a shield of power. His empire, forged through ruthless deals, had amassed millions, but left his heart hollow. His son, Ethan, had rejected the family business for medicine, sparking a bitter fight that still stung. "You're throwing away your legacy," Arthur had shouted, words he now regretted as he strode toward his tower, his breath clouding in the crisp air. Then it struck, a dull ache in his chest, like a knot tightening. He paused, rubbing his sternum, blaming stress from a looming merger. He popped a peppermint candy into his mouth, a habit to steady his nerves. But the ache exploded, a white-hot vice crushing his ribs, searing down his left arm. His vision swam, the skyscrapers tilting like toppling cards. Gasping, he stumbled, his polished shoes scraping the pavement. The crowd swirled around him, faces blurring into a mosaic of curiosity and indifference. Phones emerged, recording, their owners more spectators than saviors. Arthur collapsed, his $1,000 suit crumpling against the cold concrete, the peppermint lodged in his throat, a silent chokehold. Lily's head snapped up, the commotion a siren in her ears. She grabbed her book and box, weaving through the crowd, her small voice rising above the murmurs. "Move, please, let me through," she shouted, her sneakers pounding the pavement. The onlookers parted, some scoffing, others frowning at the ragged girl dragging her wares. She reached Arthur, his face ashen, lips tinged blue, his breath shallow and ragged. The crowd's laughter erupted, sharp and cruel. "A kid playing doctor?" a man in a trench coat sneered. But Lily knelt beside Arthur, her pale hands steady, her mother's voice echoing. "When someone's dying, Lily, you act. No hesitation." She checked his pulse, weak, faltering. His blue lips betrayed more than a heart attack. Peering into his mouth, she spotted the peppermint candy, blocking his airway, worsening the crisis. Sam's lessons flashed. Airway first, then heart. With practiced calm, she tilted Arthur's head back, her fingers deftly dislodging the candy. It skittered across the pavement, and the crowd gasped, silenced. Lily positioned her hands over his sternum, her elbows locked, and began CPR, her compressions deep and rhythmic. 1, 2, 3. She counted softly, her small body rocking with each press, sweat beading on her forehead. "Stay with me, sir," she whispered, her blue eyes locked on his lifeless face. The crowd watched, transfixed, their phones now capturing a miracle. A woman in a fur coat murmured, "She's actually doing it." Lily's hands ached, but she pressed on, her mother's notes vivid. "CPR buys time for life." She checked his airway again, then resumed, her rhythm flawless. Sirens wailed closer, cutting through the city's din. Arthur's chest twitched, a faint gasp escaping his lips. His pulse strengthened under her fingers, a fragile spark. "You're gonna make it," Lily said, her voice a lifeline. Paramedics burst through, their equipment clattering. A medic, badge reading Tom, knelt beside her. "Step back, kid," he said, but his tone shifted as he saw her technique. "Who taught you this?" Lily didn't pause. "My mom, my grandpa." Tom took over, guiding Arthur onto a stretcher. As the ambulance doors closed, Arthur's eyes flickered open, meeting Lily's fierce gaze. She stood alone, her candy bars scattered, her book clutched tight. The crowd dispersed, whispering of the miracle kid. But as Lily gathered her things, a figure lingered across the street. A man in a sleek coat, his slick black hair catching the fading light. His eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on her. What had her courage unleashed? The last echoes of ambulance sirens faded into the Manhattan dusk, leaving Fifth Avenue bathed in a restless twilight. Lily Miller trudged back to her corner, her cardboard box of candy bars battered, her pale blue eyes still bright with the adrenaline of saving Arthur Vance's life. The memory of his ashen face, the peppermint she'd dislodged, and her steady compressions lingered, a quiet triumph. But the man in the sleek coat, his cold, calculating gaze fixed on her as the crowd dispersed, cast a shadow over her victory. She clutched her mother's basic anatomy book, its worn cover a talisman against the unease creeping up her spine. The city's pulse thrummed, but for Lily, the world felt suddenly smaller, sharper, dangerous. In a cramped Queens apartment, the air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and peeling linoleum. Lily pushed open the door, her sneakers scraping the frayed rug. Samuel Sam Miller sat at a rickety table, his graying blonde hair catching the flicker of a single bulb. At 58, his weathered face bore the scars of a life torn apart, once a revered army medic in Iraq, now a janitor haunted by disgrace. His blue eyes, heavy with ghosts, softened as Lily entered. "Rough day, kiddo?" he asked, his voice gravelly but warm. Lily dropped her box, her freckled face alight with urgency. "Grandpa, I saved a man. Heart attack. I did CPR, just like you taught me." Sam's mug froze halfway to his lips, his eyes widening. "You what?" Lily recounted the chaos on Fifth Avenue. Arthur's collapse, the crowd's laughter, the peppermint choking him, her hands pressing life back into his chest. Sam listened, pride swelling in his chest, but worry carved deeper lines into his face. He'd taught her battlefield first aid, techniques honed under gunfire, when she was barely 5, her small hands practicing on a scavenged CPR dummy. But her passion came from her mother, Emily, a nurse who died of leukemia when Lily was 4. Emily's medical books lined their sagging shelves, her handwritten notes in basic anatomy. Every life matters, fueling Lily's dreams. At the public library, Lily spent hours devouring texts, her pale fingers tracing diagrams of the heart, her mind a sponge for terms like cardiac arrest. "You're your mother's daughter," Sam said, his voice catching. "She'd be so proud." But his pride was tinged with fear. In Iraq, he'd faced a brutal choice: save 3 wounded soldiers or a captain's son trapped and fading. He chose the 3, their cries louder, their chances better. A powerful senator, the captain's father, twisted the truth, and the media branded Sam a coward who'd abandoned a hero. Discharged in shame, he'd buried his medals in a shoebox, his life in this dim apartment. Teaching Lily was his redemption, but it came with a cost. "Saving people draws eyes, Lily," he said, his voice low. "Not all of them are kind." The man in the coat flashed in her mind and she nodded, her resolve unshaken. Across the city, Mount Sinai Hospital's corridors gleamed under fluorescent lights. Dr. Evelyn Reed paced, her auburn hair tied tight, her fair skin flushed with intrigue. The paramedics' report lay open. An 8-year-old girl performed textbook CPR, cleared the airway obstruction. Unbelievable, she muttered, yet Arthur Vance's survival was proof. In his luxurious suite, Arthur stirred. His sharp blue eyes clouded, his gray hair mussed against the pillow. The girl's fierce gaze, "Calm down, I'm a doctor," haunted him, clashing with his Wall Street cynicism. "A kid," he rasped to Dr. Reed. "Some street girl. Too good to be true." Dr. Reed's brow furrowed. "Her technique was flawless, Mr. Vance. She saved your life." Arthur's lips tightened, but the watch Lily had returned to a nurse asking for nothing, nagged at him. Dr. Reed studied his chart, her unease growing. Arthur's vitals were stabilizing, but his heart rate dipped oddly, defying standard recovery. Her toxicology screen, ordered on instinct, was still pending, but something felt wrong. "We're running more tests," she said, her voice measured. Arthur waved her off, his mind elsewhere. Ethan, his son, estranged by his own harsh words. "You're wasting your life." Guilt stirred, a crack in his armored heart. In Queens, Lily lay on her cot, her mother's book open to a page on heart rhythms. Emily's notes seemed to whisper, "Act when it counts." Saving Arthur had felt like stepping into her mother's shoes, but Sam's warning echoed, "Heroes make enemies." The phone rang, shattering the silence. Sam answered, his voice tense. "Who's this?" The caller's words were clipped, ominous. "Your granddaughter's making waves. Watch your back." Sam's jaw clenched, his soldier's instincts flaring. "Lily," he said, turning to her, "no more Fifth Avenue tomorrow." Her eyes flashed with defiance, but fear flickered beneath. At the hospital, Dr. Reed exited Arthur's room, her clipboard tight in her hands. A figure lingered in the hallway, his slick black hair catching the light, his pale face unreadable. She didn't know him, but his presence felt like a storm brewing. In Queens, Lily clutched her book, the stranger's gaze and the phone call merging into a single, chilling threat. What had her act of courage set in motion? The sterile hum of Mount Sinai Hospital's corridors buzzed under the cold glare of fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the restless Manhattan night pressing against the windows. In a luxurious private suite, Arthur Vance lay propped against crisp pillows, his sharp blue eyes clouded with exhaustion and unease. The memory of Lily Miller's small, fierce voice, "Calm down, I'm a doctor," lingered from the chaos on Fifth Avenue, where her hands had pulled him back from death's edge. His gray hair, once impeccable, fell disheveled, his hospital gown a humbling shroud for the Wall Street titan. The cryptic phone call to Sam Miller in Queens, its ominous warning. "Your granddaughter's making waves," echoed in the city's pulse, a threat Arthur couldn't yet grasp. His fingers traced the edge of his returned watch, its weight a silent rebuke to his growing doubt. Dr. Evelyn Reed stood at his bedside, her auburn hair tightly bound, her fair skin taut with focus. The paramedics report, 8-year-old girl performed textbook CPR, cleared airway obstruction, sat heavy on her clipboard, defying logic. Arthur's survival was a miracle, yet his vitals told a troubling story. Erratic dips in heart rate, defying standard recovery. Her toxicology screen, ordered on a hunch after noticing his symptoms, was still processing, but unease gnawed at her. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice measured but probing, "that girl's actions were extraordinary. She didn't just save you, she knew exactly what to do." Arthur's lips tightened, his cynicism a reflex honed by years of betrayal. "A street kid," he muttered. "Nobody's that selfless. What's her angle?" Dr. Reed's brow furrowed, but the image of Lily returning Arthur's watch to a nurse, asking for nothing, challenged his words. The suite's door swung open, and Ethan Vance strode in, his sandy hair mussed from a sleepless night, his green eyes blazing with urgency. At 24, the Columbia medical student was a stark contrast to his father's cold ambition, warm, driven by a need to heal, not conquer. Their last fight, when Arthur scorned his career choice, "You're throwing away your legacy," hung heavy, but seeing his father frail softened Ethan's anger. "Dad, I read the report," he said, his voice tight. "A kid named Lily Miller saved you. I'm going to find her, thank her." Arthur's gaze hardened, his doubt fanned by the mysterious call's shadow. "Don't be foolish, Ethan. People don't act without motive. She's probably after money." Ethan's fists clenched, his medical training clashing with his father's skepticism. "She saved your life, Dad. That's not a scam. It's a gift." Before Arthur could retort, the door opened again, and Julian Thorne glided in, his slick black hair gleaming, his pale face wearing a mask of concern. Arthur's nephew and vice president of Vance Enterprises, Julian's polished smile hit a predator's edge. "Uncle, you're looking better," he said, his voice smooth as glass. He turned to Ethan, his eyes narrowing. "Though this story about a street girl, it's odd, isn't it? A kid performing CPR like a pro? Sounds like a setup, maybe for a lawsuit." Ethan bristled, but Arthur's silence was deafening, his doubt deepening. Julian pressed on, his tone casual but calculated. "Who teaches a child like that? Could be someone pulling strings, looking for a payout." Ethan's heart sank, but he held his ground. "She's no fraud, Julian. I'll prove it." He'd seen the paramedics report, Dr. Reed's notes. Lily's skill was real. He turned to leave, determined to find her in Queens, but Julian's gaze followed, sharp and predatory. "Be careful, Ethan," Julian said, his smile ablade. "Not everyone's as noble as you think." Dr. Reed watched the exchange, her unease growing. Julian's charm felt like a veneer over something darker, and Arthur's condition nagged at her. "Mr. Vance," she said, "we're waiting on those test results. Your recovery, it's not quite right." Arthur waved her off, but her words lingered, a puzzle piece out of place. Outside, Ethan stood in the hospital's shadow, the city's neon pulse a stark contrast to his racing thoughts. The paramedics report, scrawled with Lily Miller, Queens, was his only lead. But as he hailed a cab, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stay away from the girl. She's trouble." Ethan's jaw tightened, his green eyes narrowing. Trouble or not, Lily had saved his father. He wouldn't let doubt, or Julian, stop him. In Queens, Lily sat on her cot, her mother's book open to a page on heart rhythms. Sam's warning about enemies and the chilling phone call replayed in her mind. "Grandpa, why would someone care that I helped?" she asked, her freckled face pale. Sam knelt beside her, his weathered hands gentle. "You shone a light, kiddo. Some people hate that." His blue eyes, haunted by his past, flickered with fear. The stranger in the coat, the call's warning, it all pointed to trouble closing in. At the hospital, Dr. Reed exited Arthur's suite, her clipboard a shield against her growing suspicion. In the hallway, a figure lingered, his slick black hair catching the light, his pale face unreadable. Julian's presence was a storm cloud, and as he slipped away, Dr. Reed's gut twisted. Arthur stared at the ceiling, Lily's selfless act clashing with his cynicism. The watch, returned without a word, felt like a judgment. Ethan sped toward Queens, the cryptic text a warning he ignored. Julian's shadow loomed larger, his plans taking shape, ready to bury a hero in lies. The Manhattan night coiled around Julian Thorne like a serpent, its neon veins pulsing as he slipped from Mount Sinai Hospital's shadowed exit. His slick black hair gleamed under streetlights, his pale face a mask of cold calculation. The cryptic text to Ethan Vance, "Stay away from the girl, she's trouble," was only the opening move in a game he'd played for months. Lily Miller's heroism on Fifth Avenue had ignited a spotlight, one that threatened to expose his darkest secret. Arthur Vance's heart attack wasn't fate, but sabotage. Julian's tailored coat flared as he strode toward a waiting car, his mind racing. The girl had to be silenced, her story buried, before it unraveled his empire. In Queens, Lily sat on the sagging couch of her dim apartment, her pale blue eyes fixed on her mother's basic anatomy book. The chilling phone call Sam had received, "Your granddaughter's making waves," echoed in the silence, its menace as tangible as the October chill seeping through cracked windows. Sam stood by the door, his graying blonde hair catching the flicker of their single bulb, his weathered hands checking the lock. "No more selling candy tomorrow, Lily," he said, his voice low, a soldier's edge honed by fear. Her freckled face hardened with defiance. "I helped someone, Grandpa. That's not wrong." Sam's blue eyes softened, but the stranger's shadow from Fifth Avenue loomed in his mind, a threat he couldn't name. Julian's plan was a calculated strike. For months, he'd siphoned millions from Vance Enterprises through an illegal real estate deal, hiding the profits in offshore accounts. To seize control, he'd swapped Arthur's heart medication with cheap counterfeits from a black market supplier, expecting a slow decline, not a public collapse. Lily's CPR had saved Arthur, but it also risked scrutiny. Doctors probing his health could trace the fake drugs to Julian. Worse, Ethan's stubborn quest to find the girl was a ticking bomb. Julian needed to crush her hero narrative before it sparked an investigation. In a dimly lit Manhattan bar, he met a blogger with hungry eyes sliding a folder across the table. "Sam Miller's military record," Julian said, his voice smooth as venom. "Disgraced medic, left a man to die. His granddaughter's the hero kid. Run it hard." By dawn, Julian stood at Lily's corner on Fifth Avenue, the cracked pavement a stark contrast to his polished shoes. Defying Sam's orders, Lily had returned, her cardboard box set up, her mother's book tucked inside. Her pale fingers trembled, not from cold, but from Julian's shadow in her memory. He approached, his smile a predator's charm. "You're the brave girl who saved my uncle," he said, crouching, his pale eyes glinting. "Impressive." Lily's grip tightened on her box, her instincts screaming. "I just did what I was taught," she said, her voice steady but wary. Julian's smile sharpened. "Smart kid, but fame's dangerous. Stick to candy, not heroics." His words, soft yet menacing, sent a shiver down her spine. He tossed $1 into her box and walked away, his shadow stretching long. At Mount Sinai, Dr. Evelyn Reed pored over Arthur's toxicology report, her auburn hair falling loose, her fair skin flushed with alarm. The results confirmed her fears. A synthetic compound, not in his prescribed medication, had triggered his heart attack. She dialed Ethan, her voice urgent. "Your father's drugs were tampered with," she said. Ethan, en route to Queens with the paramedics report, Lily Miller, Queens, clutched his phone, his green eyes narrowing. "Julian," he said, the name a curse. The text, the blogger, the hospital's unease. It all pointed to his cousin. "I'm finding Lily," he told Dr. Reed. "She's not safe." In Queens, Ethan knocked on the Miller's door, his sandy hair damp from the morning mist. Sam opened it, his blue eyes wary, his weathered frame tense. "I'm Ethan Vance," he said, his voice earnest. "Your granddaughter saved my father. I need to thank her." Lily peeked from behind Sam, her freckled face curious but cautious. "Is he okay?" she asked. Ethan nodded, kneeling to her level. "Because of you. How'd you learn that?" Sam stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Careful, kid. Your family's trouble." Ethan's heart sank, but Lily's mention of a man at her corner, "He scared me," confirmed his fears. Julian wasn't just doubting her, he was targeting her. In a Manhattan high-rise, Julian scrolled through the blogger's draft, his pale face smug. The smear on Sam and Lily was ready to launch, a viral bomb to bury their story. But a message from his supplier flashed. "Cops are asking questions. Pay up or I talk." His smile faltered, his slick hair catching the office's cold light. He dialed the blogger. "Publish it now," he snapped. Across town, Ethan sped toward the hospital, his phone buzzing with a tip. Transaction records linking Julian to an offshore account. Dr. Reed met him in the corridor, her eyes grim. "The police are tracing the supplier," she said, "but Julian's moving fast." In Queens, Lily clutched her mother's book, Julian's threat echoing. "Fame's dangerous." Sam sat beside her, his weathered hand steady. "We'll face this, kiddo," he said, but fear flickered in his eyes. Ethan's evidence was mounting, but Julian's web was tightening. The city held its breath as a storm of lies prepared to break, and Lily's light stood at its center, fragile but unyielding. The Manhattan dawn broke in a haze of gray, its muted light barely reaching the cracked sidewalks of Queens. Lily Miller stood at her candy-selling corner on Fifth Avenue, her pale blue eyes scanning the street. Julian Thorne's chilling words, "Fame's dangerous," etched into her mind like a scar. Her cardboard box sat untouched, her mother's basic anatomy book tucked inside, its pages a shield against the fear stirred by his predatory smile. The ominous phone call to Sam, "Your granddaughter's making waves," and the shadowy figure outside their apartment last night tightened the knot in her chest. Her freckled face was pale, but her resolve burned. She'd saved a man's life. Why did it feel like a trap? Across town, Ethan Vance gripped his phone outside Mount Sinai Hospital. The cryptic text, "Stay away from the girl. She's trouble." A thorn in his mind. Julian's alley meeting with the blogger, caught on Ethan's recording, and Dr. Evelyn Reed's toxicology report, proof of tampered medication, pointed to a chilling truth. Julian had poisoned Arthur. Ethan's sandy hair caught the morning mist as he dialed Dr. Reed. "We need to protect Lily," he said, his green eyes fierce. "Julian's targeting her to cover his tracks." Dr. Reed's voice was grim. "The police are tracing the drug supplier, but we need solid evidence linking Julian. Check his financials." Before Ethan could reply, his phone lit up with a notification. A blog post had exploded online. "Hero kid or coward's granddaughter?" The headline was a blade, slicing through Lily's heroism. The article smeared Sam Miller as a disgraced Army medic who'd abandoned a comrade in Iraq, leaving him to die. Lily, it sneered, was a fraud, a street kid exploiting a staged act for attention. Social media ignited, hashtags like Russian fraud kid trending as trolls spewed venom. "No way a kid does CPR like that." "Her grandpa's a traitor," Ethan's stomach churned. Julian's gambit had landed, and it was devastating. In Queens, Lily trudged home, her box lighter than her heart. Sam sat at their kitchen table, his graying blonde hair disheveled, his weathered face buried in his hands. The apartment's single bulb flickered, casting shadows over Emily's medical books. Lily had seen the blog post on a library computer, its lies cutting deeper than her classmates' taunts. "They're saying you're a coward, Grandpa," she whispered, her voice trembling. Sam pulled her close, his blue eyes raw with pain. "It's not true, kiddo. In Iraq, I saved 3 men. The one I couldn't save, his father made sure I paid for it." His voice broke, the memory of that twisted narrative, a senator's vendetta, still a wound. The doorbell buzzed, sharp and cold. 2 Child Protective Services officers stood at the door, their clipboards official, their faces stern. "Mr. Miller, we're investigating your suitability as a guardian," one said, eyeing Lily. "These allegations raise serious concerns." Lily's heart plummeted, her small hands clutching Sam's arm. "You can't take me," she cried, her freckles stark against her pale face. Sam's jaw tightened, his soldier's resolve flaring. "She's my family. You've got no right." The officers left, promising a review, but the threat lingered, a guillotine over their bond. At the library, Ms. Clara, the silver-haired librarian who'd guided Lily to medical texts, saw the news and acted. Her kind eyes flashed with defiance as she called a local reporter. "Lily's no fraud," she said. "She studies medicine here daily, teaching herself. This smear's a lie." A few neighbors, regular buyers of Lily's candy, joined in, sharing stories of her kindness. Their voices were a faint beacon, but the online storm roared louder, threatening to drown them out. Lily sat in the library's quiet corner, tracing her mother's notes. Act when it counts. She wouldn't break, not now. Ethan stormed into Dr. Reed's office, the blog post searing his phone. "Julian's behind this," he said, his voice low with fury. "He's burying Lily to hide the poisoning." Dr. Reed, her auburn hair loose from stress, nodded. "The synthetic compounds from a black market source. If we link Julian to it, he's done." Ethan's mind flashed to the alley. Julian's folder, his smug grin. He'd tailed him once. He'd do it again. "I'm going after his record," he said, his green eyes blazing. Dr. Reed grabbed his arm. "He's dangerous, Ethan. Be smart." That night, Ethan followed Julian to a shadowed Manhattan alley, the city's pulse a low thrum. Julian met a man in a hooded jacket, Their voices hushed. "The kid's story is buried," Julian said, handing over cash. "Keep it that way." Ethan's phone recorded every word, his heart pounding. But as he shifted, a bottle clinked underfoot. Julian's head snapped around, his pale face sharp in the moonlight. "Who's there?" he barked. Ethan slipped into the shadows, his breath held, knowing he'd just raised the stakes. In Queens, Lily lay awake, the CPS threat in Julian's words replaying. Footsteps echoed outside, deliberate, close. Peering through the window, she saw a figure in the shadows, watching their building. Sam sat beside her, his weathered hands steady. "We'll fight this, kiddo," he said, his voice firm. Across town, Arthur stirred in his hospital bed, the blog post flashing on his phone. Lily's selfless act, saving him, returning his watch, clashed with the lies. Guilt gnawed at him for doubting her. Ethan's evidence was mounting, Julian's web unraveling, and a reckoning was coming, one that would change everything. The October noon draped Manhattan in a brittle light, its skyscrapers gleaming like blades against a pale sky. Inside the mahogany-paneled office of Vance Enterprises, Arthur Vance sat behind his towering desk, his sharp blue eyes no longer dulled by hospital frailty, but alight with a steely resolve. The viral blog post, "Hero Kid or Coward's Granddaughter," had seared Lily Miller and her grandfather Sam into public disgrace, its lies clashing with Arthur's memory of Lily's fierce hands pulling him from death on Fifth Avenue. Dr. Evelyn Reed's toxicology report, confirming a black market drug in his system, and Ethan's grainy alley recording, Julian Thorne's voice snarling, "The kid's story is buried," formed a damning truth. Arthur's gray hair was neat again, his tailored suit a return to power, but his heart bore the weight of guilt for doubting a child who'd saved him. Ethan Vance stood by the office's floor-to-ceiling windows, his sandy hair catching the light, his green eyes burning with purpose. The sergeant's testimony from Sam's squad mate, proving Sam's heroism in Iraq, was now with a trusted reporter, poised to shatter Julian's smear. Ethan clutched his phone, the recording and flagged offshore transactions, evidence of Julian's illegal deals. A ticking bomb. Dr. Reed, her auburn hair tied back, stood beside him, her toxicology folder open. "Mr. Vance," she said, her fair skin taut with conviction, "the police are ready to act once we tie Julian to the supplier." Arthur's jaw tightened, his voice low. "Get him in here. Now." In Queens, Lily sat at the kitchen table, her pale blue eyes red from sleepless nights haunted by the CPS threat. Her mother's basic anatomy book lay open, Emily's notes. Every life matters. A quiet strength against the storm of lies. Sam, his weathered face etched with defiance, packed a small bag, his graying blonde hair falling into his eyes. "If they try to take you, Lily, we'll go," he said, his voice rough but steady. Lily's freckled face hardened. "No running, Grandpa. You're a hero. I'll show them." Her words, fierce for an 8-year-old, echoed the courage that had saved Arthur, a spark unbowed by Julian's venom. The office doors swung open, and Julian glided in, his slick black hair gleaming, his pale face wearing a polished smile that faltered under Arthur's icy stare. "Uncle, good to see you strong," he said, his voice smooth but brittle. Arthur didn't rise. "Sit." Ethan stepped forward, his phone raised, playing the alley recording. Julian's voice filled the room. "Keep it that way." A confession of sabotage. Dr. Reed slid the toxicology report across the desk. "A synthetic compound caused your heart attack," she said, her eyes sharp. "Not your prescribed medication." Ethan tossed the transaction records, his voice cold. "Your offshore accounts, Julian. You bought the fakes." Julian's pale face drained, his eyes darting like a cornered animal. "This is a mistake," he stammered, but Arthur's voice cut through, lethal as a blade. "You poisoned me for my company." Julian's facade crumbled, sweat beading on his forehead. "You were weak, Uncle. I was saving the business." His confession spilled. Greed, jealousy of Ethan's favor, desperation to hide his theft. Arthur stood, his presence towering. "You're finished." Police officers entered, cuffs glinting, and Julian's smug mask shattered as they led him away, a fallen predator. Across town, Ethan's reporter broke the story. Hero medic vindicated Sam Miller's truth. The sergeant's testimony detailed Sam's choice, saving 3 soldiers under fire, sacrificing one beyond hope, twisted by a senator's vendetta. Social media turned, urged justice for Sam, trending as the public rallied. Ms. Clara, the silver-haired librarian, shared the article at the library, her kind eyes proud. "That's Lily's grandpa," she told patrons. CPS called Sam, their tone contrite. The investigation was dropped. Sam sank into a chair, tears streaking his weathered face as Lily hugged him, her small hands fierce. "I knew you were a hero," she whispered, her freckles dancing with her smile. Ethan drove to Queens, the city's pulse softer now, the storm breaking. He found Lily and Sam at their apartment, the TV flashing the vindicating headlines. "Julian's arrested," Ethan said, his green eyes warm. "Sam, your name's clear." Lily's eyes welled, her fear melting into relief. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan knelt, his voice earnest. "You saved my dad, Lily. I owe you." Sam shook Ethan's hand, his grip strong. "You're a good man. Your father's lucky." Advance Enterprises, Arthur sat alone, the office silent. The blog's lies, his own doubts, pressed heavy. He remembered Emily, Lily's mother, a nurse in his neglected charity project, her illness ignored in his pursuit of wealth. Guilt choked him. He'd failed her just as he'd failed Ethan. He dialed his son, his voice softer than ever. "Ethan, bring Lily and Sam to the house tonight. We have work to do." As he hung up, Arthur stared at a photo of Ethan, young and hopeful, a reminder of what he'd nearly lost. Lily's courage had cracked his heart open, and redemption was calling. In Queens, Lily tucked her mother's book under her arm, her small hands steady. Sam watched, his blue eyes clear, the weight of years lifting. "Ready, kiddo?" he asked. Lily nodded, her smile fierce. "I'm going to be a doctor, Grandpa, like Mom." As they prepared to meet Arthur, a new chapter was dawning, one where a child's light would reshape a titan's legacy. The October evening settled over Manhattan like a soft exhale, its golden light softening the sharp edges of the city's skyline. Inside Arthur Vance's sprawling Upper East Side mansion, the air was warm with possibility, a stark contrast to the cold hospital suite where his life had hung by a thread. The guilt that had gripped him, doubting Lily Miller, failing his son Ethan, ignoring Emily's charity, had cracked his once impenetrable heart. His sharp blue eyes, now softened, surveyed the grand dining room as he prepared to meet Lily and Sam, his gray hair neatly combed, his tailored suit a quiet return to strength. Julian Thorne's confession, his arrest for poisoning Arthur, and the vindication of Sam's heroism had shifted the ground beneath them all. Tonight, Arthur would make amends. In Queens, Lily Miller stood before a cracked mirror, smoothing the crisp blue dress Ethan had sent for her. Her tangled blonde hair was neatly braided, her freckled face glowing with nervous excitement. Her mother's basic anatomy book sat on the table, Emily's notes. Every life matters. A guiding star. Sam, his weathered face lighter than it had been in years, adjusted his tie, his graying blonde hair catching the dim light. The sergeant's testimony, broadcast across the city, had restored his honor, silencing the blog's lies. The CPS threat was gone, their bond unbroken. "Ready, kiddo?" Sam asked, his blue eyes proud. Lily nodded, her pale blue eyes fierce. "I'm going to be a doctor, Grandpa, like Mom." Ethan Vance drove them through Manhattan, his sandy hair catching the streetlights, his green eyes warm with purpose. The confrontation with Julian had mended something between him and Arthur, their shared fight for truth, a bridge over years of distance. "Dad wants to make things right," Ethan told Lily, his voice steady. "You changed him." Lily clutched her book, Julian's chilling words. "Fame's dangerous." Now a fading echo. The city's pulse felt softer, its neon glow a promise rather than a threat. At the mansion, Arthur greeted them at the door, his presence commanding yet humbled. "Lily, Sam," he said, his voice softer than his Wall Street persona. "Thank you for coming." The dining room gleamed with crystal and mahogany, But Arthur's warmth set the tone. He knelt to Lily's level, his sharp eyes meeting hers. "You saved my life," he said, his voice thick. "I doubted you, and I'm sorry." Lily's freckles danced as she smiled. "I just did what Mom taught me." Arthur's gaze shifted to Sam. "Your courage, through Lily, gave me a second chance. And Emily." He paused, guilt flashing. "I failed her years ago, ignoring her work. I won't fail her daughter." Over dinner, Arthur unveiled his plan. "I'm establishing the Miller Legacy Fund," he said, his voice steady. "A scholarship for children of veterans and those in need, kids like Lily with a gift for medicine." Lily's eyes widened, her small hands gripping her fork. "Me?" she whispered. Arthur nodded. "You're the first recipient. Full support to become a doctor." Sam's weathered hands trembled, his blue eyes misty. "For Emily's girl," he said, his voice breaking. Ethan smiled, his green eyes proud. "It's more than that, Dad. It's for every kid told their dreams are too big." The next week, the fund's launch filled a Manhattan community center with reporters, educators, and families. Lily stood on a small stage, her blue dress bright under the lights, her braided hair framing her determined face. She held a model automated external defibrillator, AED, explaining its paddles to a group of wide-eyed children. "When someone's heart stops," she said, her voice clear, "you stay calm, like a real doctor." The crowd murmured in awe, her poise belying her 8 years. Ms. Clara, the silver-haired librarian, beamed from the front row, her kind eyes shining. "That's our Lily," she whispered to a neighbor. Arthur stood beside Ethan, his sharp features softened by pride. "She didn't just save my life, Ethan," he said, his voice low. "She saved my soul." Ethan nodded, his hand on his father's shoulder, their bond mended. Arthur had fully embraced Ethan's medical path, their shared vision for the fund a new legacy. Sam, now a paramedic trainer, watched from the sidelines, his honor restored, his blue eyes clear. The news cycle, once vicious, now celebrates Lily and Sam, their story a beacon of truth over lies. As the event ended, Lily approached a nervous boy, his eyes wide as she showed him the AED. "It's okay," she said, her smile warm. "The first rule is to stay calm, just like a real doctor." The boy grinned, her courage infectious. Arthur watched, his heart full, remembering Emily's charity work he'd once dismissed. This fund was his redemption, a promise to nurture dreams like Lily's. Years later, a teenage Lily stood in a university lecture hall, her scholarship-funded textbooks open, her mother's basic anatomy beside her. Sam, now a respected trainer, visited her, his weathered face proud. The fund had launched dozens of young healers, each carrying Lily's spark. Ethan, now a doctor, worked alongside Dr. Reed, their hospital a hub for the fund's scholars. Arthur, no longer the cold tycoon, led the fund's expansion, ensuring no gifted child was overlooked. Lily's light, born on a Manhattan pavement, had reshaped a city's heart, proving that even the smallest hands could carry the biggest dreams. As the Manhattan skyline fades into twilight, Lily Miller's courage lingers, a beacon for dreamers everywhere. Her story reminds us that even the smallest hands can change the world. What did Lily's journey spark in you? Share your thoughts below. Where are you listening from, and what moved you most? Your voice matters. Thank you for joining us on this heartfelt ride, for believing in heroes like Lily. Until our next story, stay inspired, stay kind, and keep dreaming big. We'll meet again soon, under the same city lights, for another tale of hope.